Hello there, and welcome back. I'm Martin, and today on Daddy Rolled a One, I'm going to be talking about a few different items from my collection, role-playing game collection, that I think are interesting as historical artifacts, but probably don't really deserve a full video dedicated to them. So I'm going to mix this with a couple other topics. So I'm going to talk about a couple of these artifacts that I'm talking about. I'm also going to show a little bit of some of my earliest role-playing game possessions that I created, like my very first character sheet, just to, as an example of how we used to do sheets back in the day when we didn't have them available. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about the time that I worked for Wizards of the Coast. I worked at an ad agency that handled their account in the very early 2000s, right after third edition had come out. And this is kind of a grab bag, I guess you could say, video that really is to just say thank you for helping me to have reached 5,000 subscribers. And it happened much more quickly than I anticipated. So on August 9th of 2023, that was the exact 6-month anniversary of my channel. I started my channel on February 9th. On August 9th, I passed 2,500 subscribers and I did a little giveaway. And then between August 9th and September 9th, so on the 7-month anniversary of my channel, I hit 5,000 subscribers, and I've already blown past that. So I'm just overwhelmed with all of your support and wanted to say thank you and just do this quick video to kind of show you some of these things again that probably don't really make sense to be shown in another context. Before we start out, though, I do want to answer a couple questions that I keep getting. So I'm going to go to that first question now.
Okay, so I had seen this word written before many times, going all the way back to the 80s, but I had never heard it pronounced out loud, and I never had reason to try to pronounce it until I was making this video. But when I was getting ready to make the video, I thought I'd better learn how to pronounce this word. So I went here and typed in this, and I saw this, and so I came here and did this.
Arquebus.
Going to do it again.
Arquebus.
Just do it one more time. All right.
Arquebus.
And I saw how it was spelled here, and I thought, okay, well, now I know how to pronounce it. So I guess the R is silent. What I didn't notice, of course, was that this toggle up here was set to British. I don't know how that happened. I never put it that way. I've never really used this how to pronounce words thing before. So I just didn't notice it. And had I noticed it, I would have seen that you could actually switch it to this, and it sounds like this.
Arquebus.
So I didn't see that, which is why I pronounced it the way I did. But hopefully that explains that for that part of the video for people who keep asking about that.
Okay, and another question I get asked a lot is, why do I mention this game when I do, or even why did I mention it at all, Empire of the Petal Throne? So people will say, oh, haven't you heard all the things that have been said about the person that created this game? And they are pretty horrific. So all I can say is, go ahead and watch my video on this. And if you skip to the 6-minute and 32-second mark, you'll know everything you need to know about why I talk about this game and also what I think about the person that created it. All right, so that's that question. And then another question that I get is asking me if I can talk about, spend more time talking about other games that were coming out around the time of D&D or slightly after, or maybe that were influenced by D&D. The ones I get asked most would be RuneQuest, also Tunnels and Trolls. So I do talk about those games from time to time, but I do talk about them mostly in the context of comparing some of their maybe mechanics to the mechanics of D&D and how they were different, and maybe how they got inspired by D&D, or what they decided to change to make things, better for them in that context, or simpler, or whatever they were trying to go for, right? So the thing is, the people that I was playing with when I discovered this game back in the early 80s, 1981, and then the stores that I was shopping at and the products they had available, it was all TSR. So I played D&D. I didn't play Tunnels and Trolls or RuneQuest or MERP or Rollmaster. And I played Star Frontiers. I didn't play Traveler. I played Gamma World. I didn't play Aftermath. And I played Top Secret, not James Bond 007. And I played Marvel superheroes from TSR, not Villains and Vigilantes or Champions. So there's nothing wrong with any of those games. I just don't have as much familiarity with them, mostly because of availability and also because of what my group was playing. So a lot of times I would just play what they were playing, and then maybe later on I would go out and buy the game that we had played, but they weren't playing those other games. So I sometimes feel maybe a little disingenuous if I were to give you, say, a history on RuneQuest, because I would be doing it not from a standpoint of like passion and love for that game, because I just don't have that familiarity with it. So again, I will talk about those games from time to time, but mostly, again, it's going to be in a context of comparing and contrasting to D&D. And I hope that answers that question and doesn't disappoint anybody. And again, it's not that I don't like those games. It's purely from a matter of familiarity. Okay, so as far as like some of these projects, I wanted to talk about some catalogs that I've had in my collection, basically, almost since I first started playing. So I've mentioned before, I started playing in the late fall of 1981. I got my first boxed set of D&D Moldvay Basic in 1982 in Easter. And in that box set was this catalog. So this is probably, if I had to guess, I'd say this is the most famous catalog from the TSR era, just because it shipped in every boxed set of the basic set, at least. It might have even been in other box sets as well, but I know very specifically that it was in the Moldvay Basic box set, probably also in the Expert set that shipped in 1981. So this is the 1981 Gateway to Adventure TSR Hobbies. And because it was in those box sets, it just got shipped to, hundreds of thousands of people. So you've got full color pictures of the, those two box sets that I just mentioned. But you also have details on the different adventures that were available. You could also buy the books separately. That's how I acquired my Expert book, was separately, not as part of the box set. You've got the Expert module X1 that was in the Expert box set. I acquired this module separately as well. So I just never got the box, but I have all the things that were included in it. You've got your player character record sheets for Dungeons and Dragons, and then it gets into D&D, Advanced D&D. So you've got the Dungeon Master's Guide, the Player's Handbook, the Monster Manual, and Deities and Demigods. So at the time when this was coming out, they had already changed. So you see here, it says over 15 different pantheons. So the original printing of Deities and Demigods had the Cthulhu and Melnibonéan deities in them, or pantheons in them. And there's a whole legal thing. We're not going to get into that now, but basically TSR, after the first two printings, starting with the third printing on of Deities and Demigods, they removed those two pantheons. And so it went from 17 to 15. So you can tell at this point that they were now on at least the third printing of that. It's probably fourth, because they actually made a mistake in the third printing. They removed those two pantheons, but they forgot to change the number. So on the back copy, if you have a Deities and Demigods third edition that doesn't have Cthulhu and Melnibonéan, but you flip it over, it'll say there's over 15 pantheons, but it's actually only, or it'll say there's 17 pantheons. It's actually only 15. But in this case, since they've said 15, I'm assuming that they've caught that. So this is probably a fourth printing. Anyway, so that's that. Then you've got the Dungeon Master's screen. That's a product I never picked up, unfortunately, because it's got this really awesome cover art here, art by this wraparound here by Dave Trampier. And then you've got your player character record sheets, and you've got your Dungeon Master's log. That's another one that I never picked up back in the day. You have your player character folder and adventure records. I never had that. And then you've got your non-player character record sheets. I do have those. I showed those in an earlier video. You've got Rogues Gallery. I have that. I had a whole video just about that one pretty recently. You've got your beginning modules, T1. You've got your competition series. You've got your G series, your special series. So I have pretty much most of these. The ones that I'm actually missing, I never did get A1. I've got A2 through 4. And then I have all of these, although my S4, I don't know what happened to that one. Oddly, I have a photocopy of it that my dad made for me, but I can't find my original. And then I never got T1. But other than that, I think I have all the rest of those. So my point of bringing that up is, if you want me to talk about any of those specifically, let me know, and I can add that to the list of topics. You've got your dungeon board game. You've got Warlocks and Warriors. It's another fantasy game, so it's a board game. You've got Divine Right, Knights of Camelot. So these are all things that TSR published back in the day. Top Secret, I just talked about that in my box set video. You've got Boot Hill, Gamma World, Fight in the Sky. So all those are ones that I talked about in my recent video on TSR box sets. I didn't talk about any of these because these are not role-playing games or supplements. I only was talking about role-playing games. You've got Snit's Revenge, a little fun board game from back in the day, and the Awful Green Things from Outer Space Fourth Dimension. And then you have these new releases, these mini games. So the one that I had was this one, Saga. I still have it, Saga, but there were 4 of these when they first came out. And these were just fun they were essentially board games, but tiny. They were small size. Mine came with a map and a bunch of little chits and a small rule book. And it was like in this little plastic folding case. You have the Fiend Folio tome, so that was new as of the time that came out. We've talked about Fiend Folio before, and that did come out in 1981. You've got Rapid Strike, Top Secret Module 002, which if you saw my video on the TSR box sets, you know that's the module that I put in my box because I don't have the original module. You need to watch that video to find out why. You've got L1, The Secret of Bone Hill, part of my collection, in terrible, terrible shape. Never did get any Boot Hill adventures, so I don't have Mad Mesa. I do have Legion of Gold for Gamma World. World of Greyhawk Fantasy World Setting. I do have a video about that, so that's in my collection. Dragon Dice AIDS. I never I had dice. You've seen my dice before, but mine came in my Moldvay box set. I never bought them separately. I have a Monster and Treasure assortment book. And then there's hexagonal mapping paper. You've got your Dungeon Geomorphs. There's a little ad here for the Role Playing Game Association. I've talked about that before. And then here's your ad for Dragon Magazine. I love Dragon Magazine. Back in the day, I didn't discover it until about issue number 76. Someone gave it to me as a gift. I still have it. I still have all my Dragon magazines. They're just all out in the garage, unfortunately. And then I started collecting. So I did go back and get a lot of the issues prior to number 76. And then my grandmother subscribed me to the magazine starting with issue number 90. And I kept that subscription up all the way until the magazine ended with number 359. It ended the print edition and it went full digital. And at that point, I just stopped because I wasn't interested in reading a digital magazine. It's just not my thing. Here's your ad for the Gen Con convention. And then all these T-shirts that you could get back in the day featuring art from all the different box games. So that one right there, that's the Holmes Basic art, basic box set art that they were still selling. But you've got the Divine Right T-shirt, Fight in the Skies. You've got the Dungeon Master's Guide, that yellow one there. You've got Top Secret, Player's Handbook, and Deities and Demigods, and all the kind of the goofy games, Awful Green Things from Outer Space, Ness Revenge, that kind of thing. And then here's your T-shirt order form to mark your size and color. So that's that catalog. Now, I do have a few others here. The mail order hobby shop catalog. So the reason I started getting this is because I was subscribed to Dragon Magazine. I told you that. My grandmother subscribed me. And the reason I know that this came from that is because she put my name on the subscription. She always called me Marty, and instead of Martin, which is fine. But she put my middle initial on there. And that was the only time that my name's ever been written this way, with, the shortened version of my first name with my middle initial that way. So I know that's where the mail order hobby shop got my address, was from my Dragon subscription. But anyway, this is a catalog. This is some fun Easley art here, Jeff Easley. And it's just list after list of all the products that they were selling. This, unfortunately, I have a discount card in here for $2 off of any order over 20, but it expired on July 11th, 1985, and I never did use it. So I lost my $2 gift certificate there. But again, just, page after page of products. And they weren't only selling TSR products. So that's what's kind of fun about this, is once you get past the TSR stuff, you get into, here's Chaosium, publishers of RuneQuest, Call of Cthulhu. You've got the Companions. You've got Fantasy Games Unlimited. They sold just a ton of games back in the day. There's Villains and Vigilantes, Aftermath, Bushido, Space Opera, Chivalry and Sorcery. You've got the Star Trek games by FASA. You've got World War II games by FASA. You've got Flying Buffalo games over here. So this is just a fun snapshot into the games that were available. This is 1984 when this catalog came out. And then you've got your dice here. So these are different dice that you could order in the different colors. And then you get into miniatures for Auto Duel, if anybody remembers that game, Steve Jackson games, which I have one of the box sets of that, the little small plastic ones. And then all the different publications that you could get: Amazing Magazine, Endless Quest books, Best of Dragon Anthology, Ares Magazine, Strategy and Tactics Magazine. And then all these little fun things that you could get, like these cases to hold your books, notepads, art portfolios, blank jigsaw puzzles. So I have just a few of these catalogs. I used to have a ton of these. When I moved, I pared it down, so I just kept one of each one. So this is spring, summer of 85. And then you've got winter of 85 and spring of 86. And then summer and fall of 86. So this is, these two have art by Larry Elmore, very famous D&D artist. He's still with us and doing art today for people. So these are just kind of fun pieces of art. I actually don't know if these were used anywhere else. I kind of suspect not, because it's, here's your US Post. And so I think this is probably done just for this catalog. It might be on the only place that you can get it. But the catalogs pretty much stayed the same throughout. So this one I just thought was funny, just to give you a sense of, so this was an order form that got thrown into one of the sets. And you can see here, this is not my writing. This is how they sent this out. It had changed after they had typeset it. And so someone at TSR, or at the mail order hobby shop, I should say, just hand wrote on here all these things that you could order and put the numbers down so that you could order them. And I always kept this because I thought it was funny that, like, what I thought was a big corporation just hand wrote on this order form for people. People might remember this, the 10th anniversary of the founding of TSR. So this would be 1984. They did this huge sale, and things were marked as being, for a certain amount of savings, right? So if you see this here, you could get all of these modules and you saved $16 versus if you bought them separately. So in this particular case, you could get all of those. It looks like you got them for $6. And this was how I acquired a bunch of the modules that I have in my collection. So I didn't get these ones because I already had G1, 2, and 3 and C1. And so my mom didn't get those for me. But I remember for Christmas that year getting packs of modules. And that coincidentally is why I, for some reason, have A2 through 4, but not A1, because I think they sold a package and it didn't have A1 in it at the time. So and I still to this day just never picked that one up. So, but I have a few modules. I know C2 very specifically I got in one of these special anniversary sales sets. That's why I have that module, the Ghost Tower of Inverness. So that's that. I just thought this kind of coloring book is funny, just to show you another thing that they put out. So this is 1983. I did start coloring it, but I never really finished. I was older at this point, so I wasn't really into coloring books. I did practice my shading a little bit. You can see here I was trying to color it more adult-like. But just a goofy little, again, timepiece of D&D stuff that was being published by TSR back in the day. So this one's kind of a little bit of also kind of a workbook almost. They have little puzzles and things in here that you can do. So that's that. And then next I'm going to talk about this piece. So this is something that, a lot of people just probably wouldn't see. This is the 1992 Press Kit from TSR. So it's kind of an interesting story why even have this. So I was in college at the time. I was taking a sales marketing class. I was a marketing major. And as part of that class, as our final, we had to pick a product or service and then do research on it. And then our final was to present it in front of the class to the teacher as though the teacher were the buyer. And then we were trying to convince them why they should carry our product or service. And so I had seen that this box set was coming out from TSR at the time. This is Dark Sun, campaign setting for second edition D&D. I'd been reading articles in Drag Magazine, and it really inspired me. I was super excited about it. And I kind of wanted to get this, but I was a starving college student. And so I was trying to figure out a way that I could, justify purchasing this box set. It was kind of, for me, it was expensive at the time. It was $20. It's nothing now, but back then that was, a substantial part of my income. And I just, needed to make sure. So anyway, I decided to pick this product and use it as my product that I was going to try to sell to the teacher. So what the premise was that he was the buyer for Walden Books, which is where I got a lot of my D&D stuff back in the day, because it was at the mall and that's how I could go when my mom went. And I was trying to convince him that he should carry this new campaign setting. And so a lot of the details in that presentation were things like, was this going to cannibalize the sales of existing settings, and why should he carry this one instead of ordering more of the ones that he already knew could sell, and that kind of thing, right? But as part of this, we had to figure out things like, how much did this actually cost to make? And then what was the supply chain like when it left from the publisher and went to the distributor, and then it went to the retailer, and like, what was the markup along the way, and all the different steps along the way that were involved. And you had to figure out, like, again, those cost markups and all these kinds of things. Now that I know better, I probably could have just made it up, made an educated guess, but I really wanted to know like how it worked, and I wanted to do my due diligence. And so I went to my first game convention ever. My dad took me because I didn't want to go by myself. It was in a hotel airport near LAX. And so I assume it was Strategicon. I remember going to the con, I just don't remember which one it was, but I assume it was Strategicon. And I met up there with the owner of the local game store that I went to all the time, where I bought this game, which was, I mentioned this before in my last video on the box sets from TSR. But it was All-Star Games in Diamond Bar, and her name was Carol, I think. And so I met up with Carol, and she knew who I was because I was in her store shopping all the time. And she introduced me to a bunch of people in the industry. There were like industry people there, not from TSR, but from, like distributors and things like that, wholesalers that would, get like where she would order the product from, because, she's not ordering directly from TSR. And so she introduced me to them, and they then gave me contacts at TSR. And so I interviewed them, and then I wrote to the PR person at TSR, and he very kindly wrote me back. So his name was Thomas McLaughlin. I never met him in person, but we corresponded mainly via fax. So so here's my fax that I sent him, where I asked him all these questions, and then he answered back and like sent it back to me. So I was just asking him all these things about, how the game worked, but he sent me this huge PR kit with all these different catalogs. So this, just to give you a sense that you saw those catalogs before from like the early 80s, this is the 90s, 92 catalog. So just a few years later, like, look how much different this is. You really get the sense that like they'd stepped up the production values. And this is all the different products that they had. Now, again, that catalog was for a mail order hobby shop, and this is for TSR, but you saw that other TSR catalog as well. And it was full color, that Gateway to Adventure, but just this one's just a little bit of a step up. So you've got your catalog, and then there were all these different little supplements in here. Like, so here's the 91 catalog. So even it's different, like it's hard to see, but this has this like glossy hard cover. And then this is a paper cover. Now this is the mail order hobby shop. So you get that kind of black and white interior, but he sent this to me as well. And then you've got this whole little outline on the market, the consumer, and the products for TSR and Strategic Simulations Inc., which TSR had acquired by this time, SSI. So the consumer and like who they were. So 90% male, well-educated, aged 10 to 24, how much they would spend, how many new gamers enter the market annually. So all this kind of fun stuff in here. Merchandising catalog to order all these like little, these little standy things that you would have in your store to carry the products. And there was a rate sheet for Dragon Magazine and close dates, like how much did an ad cost, and when were the ads due, if you wanted to run in a particular issue. So you see, if you wanted to run a full page ad, it was $600 back then. And then you've got your black and white display rates over here. So this is, again, stuff that just, and you have no reason to, but like the average person would never see stuff like this, because this was for the trade. This was to get people to carry their products. So a lot of these are just, PR press releases, and he stuck them all in here. And then again, you've got my fax that he answered. More merchandising catalogs. You've got little things this is for Dark Sun. This one, I believe, is for Buck Rogers, if I can get it out. A Galaxy of Profits. Probably one of their least performing products of all time, but they were really pushing it. And then a couple little packs in here of special collector card sets for Toy Fair 1992. So I've just had these, this whole time. And what's it been, like over 30 years that I've had this. So that's that. Now, what's kind of cool about that as well is that he sent me two. So this one doesn't have everything in here, but this was my account profile from my class, and you see I got a 95%. So, which was an A, which was awesome. So that was my project here, and then I just stuck a couple other things in here that he sent me. So there was a Warhammer catalog that he had. I don't know why he would have put that in there. Gary Gygax's Dangerous Journeys, stuck that in there as well. I might have picked these up at the convention, stuck them in there now that I think about it when I talk to the other manufacturers who were there. So that's that. And then I thought it might be fun also to look at a couple of things that I created back in the day, right after I discovered role-playing games. So one of the first things I did was in my 7th grade English class, we had to create a game. That was the project that the teacher gave us to create a game. So most kids, of course, did board games because that's what they were used to. But I had just been introduced the year prior to D&D. And so I decided to make a D&D ripoff game. And the idea of the game was that it had to be based on a book that you had read. So I had obviously read some book, well, it's not obvious, but about King Arthur and the Round Table. And reading King Arthur books is how I got into playing D&D. One of my friends saw me reading King Arthur mythology books and asked me if I'd read other fantasy books, let me borrow some books like Conan and things like that, John Carter of Mars, and then introduced me to playing D&D. And so I had read this King Arthur story. So you can clearly see this is based off of the Moldvay box set. And I called this the Basic Rules. And you can see I got an A as my grade, but I still have this all these years later. So I drew this very janky drawing, but I was a kid. I was trying. And then it's, of course, handwritten on notebook paper because we didn't have computers back then to do stuff like this. It wasn't something that you'd have in your home. So I wrote all this out, and I just followed the Moldvay basic kind of set. So I talked about how you need to get dice, and I even mentioned that you could get them. If you can't find, you could get them from someplace called FMS Hobbies. I have no memory of that store. I remember going to a different hobby store. I don't remember this one for some reason. But I had an introduction, how to use dice, how to make a player character. And it's just really goofy, but I just kind of thought I would show this to you guys, to show you what a nerd I was for role-playing games, pretty much right all the way back to the start. So this is really just kind of simplifying and copying Moldvay Basic, but putting it in a King Arthur type setting. Although what's interesting in this is I made a skill system. So very early on, I followed the skill system from the Thief class of D&D, but I implemented to where any character could use those skills. And I hadn't seen anything like that before. So to me, that was innovative. So that's that. And then I think a year or two later, some friends and I made this. So the same people that taught me how to play D&D, we made our own module. So you can see by this point, we had access to a computer. One kid did. So he was the guy that typed this. And his name is Russ Mickler. That was the guy that had the computer. And then my friend John drew this picture. So John was actually the guy that saw me reading the King Arthur books and introduced me to D&D. So he drew that picture. And what's funny is we put that this was from TSR Hobbies. We just assumed that we were going to write this and then mail it to TSR, and they'd be so impressed that they would just publish it. So it's terrible. It's just, it's exactly what you think it would be. But it's not well written. There's tons of typos. You can see there's mistakes made in here. The thing makes no sense. There's an evil wizard protecting a sword that lives with a bunch of Death Knights. And then there's a bunch of drow that are fighting the Death Knights. And the reason we did that was because we just gotten the Fiend Folio, and Death Knights and drow were like two of the coolest things in that book, we thought at the time. So we thought we might as well throw them in there. And then the last little thing I'm going to show from my early collection is this. So this is my very first character sheet of my first character that I had. So you look at these stats, and clearly I did not roll them. It's because my DM, who was the guy who drew that picture that you saw, he assigned these stats to me. So I didn't cheat on these. He said, these are your stats. He asked me what class I wanted to be, and I said fighter. So he gives me. And then you can just see all the items that I had. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And And then it's really hard to see on the back here, but there's more items that I had. And I don't remember what I was whiting out there. But my friend and I, the way that we used to play back in the day was that I would write him in class. Well, he would write me a note and he'd pass me saying, like, this is what you see. What do you want to do? And then I'd write underneath it. And I'd say, oh, I'm going to go this way. I'm going to go that way, north or south, or I'm going to attack it with my sword. I'm going to attack it with my mace. And then he would write back and tell me what happened. So sometimes he would try to sneak and roll dice, but a lot of times he would just make it up and we would just pass these notes back and forth. And so I was technically playing like a, one player, one DM game during class. That was how I kind of started. And then, on weekends, that's when we would play with like big groups. So he would do the thing that he was doing with me, with other friends as well, like one-on-one, depending on what class you were in, right? So the class I was in with him, he would play D&D with me, and then other classes he'd play with other folks. And then this is my first AD&D character sheet that I made. So this was my ranger that I had. And so that's this guy. And so that's it for that. All right. And then really quickly, I did want to talk about working with Wizards of the Coast and kind of how that came about. So I was working at an ad agency in the early 2000s, and the agency I was working at here in LA, their main office in New York handled the Hasbro account. And so when Hasbro acquired Wizards of the Coast, they had to decide where they were going to staff the account out of. And they decided to staff Wizards of the Coast advertising out of the LA office because it was closer, same time zone and whatnot. And so once I found that out, I went to my boss and asked if I could be put in charge of that account because I was the only one in the office that knew anything about these games. And so she agreed. And so I met the client and they sent me a ton of stuff in the mail. So they sent me this Star Wars D20 game. They had just acquired this license. So this was the Star Wars D20 version they based on. And then this was kind of like the introductory game. They sent me this as well, the Invasion of Theed. I never even took the shrink wrap off of this one. But they sent me all 3 core books for 3E. I still have them. They're just out in the garage because once we switched to 3.5, I didn't refer to my 3E books anymore. So I packed them away. But so they sent me and then tons of cards for like Magic and Pokemon. And they had a Looney Tunes card thing. They had a wrestling card game. They had a MLB baseball card game. So they sent me a bunch of cards with that. But the thing that really intrigued my coworkers was the D&D ones. And so one of them, my friend Melinda, said, hey, can you run a D&D game for us? And I said, yeah, I can do that. And so I finally started in May of 2001. And I used this campaign setting that I'd been working on all throughout the 80s. Or not 80s, all throughout the 90s. I'd started it kind of like late 80s. And during the 90s, I didn't really play D&D a lot because, I was in college and I started my job and I was busy and I met now my wife and we were, dating and getting ready to get married. And so I just didn't really play a lot of role-playing games. And but I worked on this campaign setting with the idea that like one day I might. So I dug out all those old notes. I still had them all. And you can see I keep everything in like little folders. So I knew exactly where everything was. I dug them out and I put together a campaign that started in May of 2001. My wife was one of my players, my best friend at the time, and a bunch of my coworkers. And we played and we are still playing. So that game is still going. Now it's been a while since we've had a session. One of the players moved. And, life gets in the way. The pandemic happened, but technically that game is still going. We switched from 3rd edition to 3.5 to Pathfinder 1E, but it's all kind of the same thing. Now, a couple of things that from my time working with Wizards of the Coast. So my client contact, she was not a gamer. She didn't know anything about this. So I kind of became like her confidant where she would ask me questions game related so that when she talked to the creative people or the production people, whatever, at her office, that she would sound like really intelligent, knew what she was talking about. And so she kind of came to trust me for that, which was really cool. But I remember one of the really sad stories she told me was they decided to start a game in the office to give people, camaraderie, but also learn what these products were, which I thought was cool because, we've all heard stories during the Lorraine Williams era of TSR that she didn't necessarily like people playing games in the office, for what I've heard. But WotC, they were playing. So they started a Star Wars D20 game and invited this client contact of mine. And she asked to play an Ewok Jedi. And they kind of laughed her out of the room. And I was always a little sad when I heard that. So now I will admit, back in the day when she told me that happened, I mean, it was, more than 20 years younger than I am now. And in my head, I immediately thought, like, Ewok Jedi, like, come on. But then, you also have to think about, like, this is a person who was not into gaming. And clearly, I think she was not really all that into Star Wars, but she was trying. She was a marketing person that was trying to develop a camaraderie and with her coworkers. And rather than accept her and try to work with her, they just immediately kind of shunned her for having an idea that they thought was stupid, is what she told me. And so she never played again. She didn't go back and try to play, role-playing games with these guys. And I always kind of thought, like, afterwards, how much better would it have been instead of saying that's a really dumb idea? I mean, if they really didn't want an Ewok Jedi, how about just say, oh, the way that we're working the game, like, Ewoks haven't figured out how to, use the Force yet. And so maybe if you could come up with a different character that would fit in better with the group, or even better than that. I know a lot of people are going to, have a problem with this, but how about, yeah, I'll see how I can figure out how to work in an Ewok Jedi into the campaign. I hadn't thought about doing that, but that seems like something that you want to play, and I'll figure it out. Now, that's not always going to work. I have, given people parameters before and said, like, these things don't exist in my world, but this is a work game. And this is a person that clearly didn't have background. How about just throw her a bone and let her join the game with the kind of character that she could think up? Because she told me that was the only thing that she could think up. Like, she clearly was not a Star Wars person. So she must have read about Ewoks somewhere or seen them somewhere. And that kind of gravitated to her. And she knew about Jedi. And so she came up with this concept, and they just shot her down without really giving her a chance. So anyway, but I did work with her for quite a while. I have a whole series of posts on my blog where I talk about, it's a 4-part series, but I talk about my years of working with Witches of the Coast. And I give you a little peek behind the curtain of, like, how corporate, America works, or specifically corporate WotC, especially being owned by Hasbro, and all of the kind of the fighting that went on, not fighting, the disagreements that went on between corporate Hasbro and then Wizards of the Coast in Seattle. And you have to remember, this was back in the day. It's not like it is now, where Wizards is like the top performing, part of Hasbro. They had just been acquired. They were used to being independent. They were used to doing things their own way. And now you had a corporate entity coming in and telling them to do things differently than they were used to. And the corporate people that I worked with, none of them knew anything about any of these games. They'd never heard of them, or if they had, they had a very negative perception of them. And so trying to do advertising for them was kind of a challenge. I'll just put it that way. But there's way more information on my blog. I'll put links to that in the show notes below if you're interested in reading through those. I wrote them, quite a while ago, probably right after I started my blog around 2012, 2013. All right. So that is kind of going to be it for this particular video. So I just, again, want to say thank you all so much for your support. I love getting your comments. And I love interacting with you in comments. I do try to get to them as quickly as I can. They come in a lot more quickly than I ever would have anticipated. So if you've left a comment and I haven't got back to you, please don't be discouraged or think that I'm avoiding you on purpose. I do try to go through, like, every night when I have a few minutes before bed, I'll go through and start to, answer questions. Sometimes if it's something that I think is going to take a little bit more of a longer, complex answer, I don't answer right away. And then I'll just be honest that sometimes I forget that to go back and try to go back and answer those questions. But I will try to get back to you. So thank you for your support. Please do also look into my shorts videos, because I will be announcing a giveaway for having reached 5,000 subscribers. And so that's where I'm going to announce it. So if you want to be, involved in that giveaway. So I did a giveaway at 2,500. I gave away an old copy of Greyhawk Supplement 1. And I did get quite a few people that joined, but a bunch of people after the fact said, like, how come I never heard about this? Well, and it's because I announced it through my shorts. So you'd have to watch the shorts in order to see that announcement. I don't know exactly what I'm going to be giving away yet. Definitely something from my shop, but then another item from my collection. So again, look for that sometime, probably the week of September 18th, 2023. Go to my shorts and see if you can find it in there. And then lastly, I'll be doing a video on coming up, a video on campaign prep. So another video in that series. And there will be another history video coming soon. I'm kind of toying on a couple different topics on where I want to go with my next D&D history video. And I might do a review. I might throw one of those in as well. So if there's something that a topic that you'd like to see me cover, please leave a note in the comments below and say, hey, is this something you can look into? And I will definitely consider it and try to add it to my list if I can. So also in the comments below, you'll find places where you can join me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm also on Blue Sky now. I know some folks are going over there, so I'm there. And what I would really like to see, and it's a place where you can do that in those areas that you can't really do here on YouTube, is I'd love to see pictures of your collection. Do you have your first character sheet? Do you have old maps that you've drawn? Or, like I made that goofy game that you saw from my 7th grade class. Like, do you have stuff like that? Like, take a picture and share it with me in one of those other places where we can share pictures with each other and have conversations about it. I would love to do that. Or you can just mention it below in the comments. It's just there's no opportunity for showing pictures down there. So also below, you will find places where you can support my channel by buying something from my shop, like a t-shirt or a hoodie, a mug, or a poster. I have all these cool designs that are exclusive to my shop. So some of them I had commissioned from an artist friend of mine, and some I had him take their patents for dice, but he had to basically recreate them from scratch because the resolution was so low. So you can't find these versions of those patent designs anywhere else except at my shop. So that's the best way that you can support me right now. I don't have a Patreon or a coffee or anything like that. So I'm looking to try to upgrade my camera equipment, my microphone, all that kind of stuff. And buying something from my shop is a great way to help me make money from that, so that I can try to put that into bettering my equipment for a more consistent audio and visual experience when you're watching my videos. So with that, I'd like to say once again, thank you so much for watching. Happy gaming. Stay safe. And I'll talk to you next time. And now for the bonus content, what I was drinking and what I was listening to when I worked on my notes for this video. So most of my notes in this case just kind of consisted of me. I made a few bullet points, but it mostly consisted of me getting into my file cabinet and digging out some of those folders that you saw earlier. I knew my old character sheets were in there. I knew were that game that I wrote back in 7th grade. I knew that was in there in a folder, just because, again, I'm very organized with this stuff. I keep pretty much everything, but I do organize it. So I just had to go through the file cabinet and pull those out. But what I was drinking while I was doing that was this. This is Old Forester 1920 Prohibition style. So it's a little bit of a beast. It's a 57.5%, so 115 proof. Just for context, typically something like a Maker's Mark is going to be 80 proof. So 40% alcohol. This is 57.5%. So it's quite aggressive. Normally I would drink this with a little bit of water. I would add to it just to help smooth it out. It's a very common thing that people can do with overproof whiskeys. And but I always try it neat first, just to get a sense. So my dad gave me this bottle for my birthday a few years ago. My birthday, I had a pretty big birthday that happened to coincide 100 years after the founding of the Old Forester distillery. But this is their 1920 Kentucky Straight Bourbon Prohibition style. So, yeah, I quite like it. Dried orange. Obviously, you've got a lot of corn on there, but there's a little bit of maple. But it is aggressive. It's got an alcoholic heat to it. So again, I would normally cut this with a little bit of water. Now, what I was listening to, Mac the Knife by Ella Fitzgerald, Ella in Berlin. One of my top, probably 3 albums of all time. Definitely a desert island album that I would listen to, take with me. Classic concert from Berlin, 1960. So she's singing songs from the Great American Songbook. You can see the songs here. And so my favorites are going to be the last 2 songs on the second side. So Mac the Knife and How High the Moon. So Mac the Knife from the, and I just forgot the name, but it is from I think it's called a penny opera, but it's that song When the Shark Bites, that kind of thing. So she sings this song because it was a crowd favorite. It was very popular at the time. From Louis Armstrong and Bobby Darin had both covered that song. So at the time it was popular. So she wanted to do it. And she starts singing very famously, partway through, she just completely forgets the lyrics of what she's singing. But rather than stop and start over, she's a consummate show person. So she just powers through and keeps going and sings to the tune of the song how she forgot the lyrics, and her band just had to keep going. They don't know what she's doing, right? So they're keeping up with her, and she's making up these lyrics about how she forgot the lyrics, and she's apologizing for forgetting the lyrics. And then she brings it back around at the end, and it's just, the crowd just goes wild because she doesn't miss a beat. Like immediately as she forgets, she just sings about it. And I just think it's hilarious, but it also just shows like what a powerful show person she was, that she could pull that off and have the crowd just basically wrapped around her finger while she's singing. And then she finishes up with How High the Moon, classic song, but she does this very, very famous scat, and it is probably the most famous scat in all of jazz vocals. And when she does that, she actually calls on little segments of like dozens of other songs. I can't even remember them off the top of my head, but she like gives little homages to all these other little songs during the scat. But the flow just goes like one to the other, and sometimes it's like maybe a second or two before she gets to the next one. It's really hard to explain, and if you don't know those songs, you wouldn't even know that that's what she's doing. But for people who know those songs, and you see like she brings in like a tisket a tasket, but I mean that's an obvious one. But there's other ones where she's just scatting in like this instrumental thing, where it's like she's scatting an instrumental song, and like once you know that that's what she's doing, it's just very, very clever. And that scat, it's like, I don't know, it's over 5 minutes of just pure scatting, and it's just a really incredible performance that really kind of finishes off this album strong. So anyway, 1960, Ellen Berlin, Mac the Knife. Definitely give it a chance. It's just a really fabulous album. All right, so that's it. Please make sure to check out a couple of the other videos here, and I will see you next time at Daddy Rolled a One. Thanks for watching.